We have many examples of Hollywood actors who, throughout their path to fame, had a large number of problems related to alcohol, drugs, gambling, among other crimes. Mark Wahlberg is no exception to the rule, and before becoming the movie superstar that he is, he had a dark past, which in a few minutes you will know what it is about. So don't move from your seat, and let's start with the video. Mark Wahlberg was born in 1971 in Boston, Massachusetts. He may also be known as Marky Mark, an old nickname as a rapper, but we'll talk about that later. Since his adolescence, he had a very difficult childhood in the world of drugs, for the reason that from the age of 13, Mark began with the consumption of cocaine, among other substances. Quite a rough start, but the problems were not limited to drug use, because he had a lot of abuse towards the African American community. Mentioning the time when Mark was 15 years old, both he and 3 of his friends started running after 3 African American children, yelling horrible things, while throwing stones at him. The next day, the situation was repeated, but with other 4-year children, mostly African American children. Also, while they were being bullied, Mark encouraged more people to join in the bullying. In that same year of 1986, a civil action was filed against Mark for violating civil rights, but that case was resolved the following month. Mark may not have had an easy childhood, for the reason that Wahlberg's father, Donald Edmund Wahlberg, was a veteran of the Korean War, so perhaps in his own home, young Mark saw violence as normal and decided to carry it out also with the weakest, as well as resorting to the excessive use of drugs. We must also mention the divorce of his parents in 1982. So all this together could activate a lot of violence deep inside Mark, despite the fact that legal action was taken against him personally. At the age of 16, Mark returned to perpetrate racist violence against a Vietnamese veteran who passed him on the street. What did he do this time? He called him fucking Vietnam and then knocked him unconscious with a wooden stick. But he did not limit himself to just that person, because that same day, he assaulted another Vietnamese man named Johnny Trinh and punched him in the eye. That violent episode got him briefly jailed, and when questioned about why he did such a thing, Mark replied, "I'll tell you now, that's the motherfucker whose head I split open." Later, Mark commented that at the time he was under the influence of PCP, a hallucinogenic drug that could answer that explosion of anger towards 2 people on the same day. Although he was clearly under drug use, Mark made multiple racist comments at that time in front of the police, and that added to the uncontrolled violence he carried out. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison for attempted murder, of which Mark is pleaded guilty. He only served 45 days in a correctional facility for minors. Later, the actor tried to apologize after those acts in 2006, since he proposed to meet Johnny Trinh to apologize. After that, it is not known in what year they met again. But the truth is that Johnny Trinh in 2016 talked about that episode and issued a public statement mentioning that he had forgiven Wahlberg for the past, understanding that he was now a totally different person. On the other hand, in 2014, Mark asked for a pardon for those crimes he committed in the 80s, since he was still marked in his record, but the justice system did not grant that request for many reasons. The first was for a testimony of what in the past was the girl that Mark had attacked, who declared that a racist will always be a racist.
And that's exactly what should be on his record forever. And for him to want to erase it, I just think is wrong.
So he did not forgive the actor for what he did, and in fact, he still had the scar that the actor did by throwing stones at him. Prosecutor Judith Beals also denied that portion, arguing that Wahlberg has never recognized the racial nature of his crimes, so to give in to that pardon would be to accept his apology and pretend that this event never happened. In those years, there was a lot of controversy about what happened, and something happened that did not benefit Mark at all, because he talked about his past and all the acts he committed. It is for all this that he decided to surrender, and in 2016, he had to apologize for demanding that pardon. His application was closed after he did not respond to questions from the Clemency Board about whether he wanted it to remain open. Once again in 1992, Mark was violent again towards another person, but this time it was not for racist reasons. It simply happened because his neighbor Robert Crehan allegedly assaulted Mark's friend Derek McCall, who is African American, with racist comments. It is for that, according to Mark, they proceeded to beat him brutally to the point that he fractured his jaw. According to the legal documents of the case, both Mark and his friend had attacked his neighbor for no reason. They just did it, while Mark was hitting him and his friend was holding him on the floor so he wouldn't get up. Despite everything that happened, the lawsuit was resolved by both parties to avoid trial. That was the last time the actor had a great controversy about his life and his indefensible acts. Leaving aside all the misfortunes, Mark decided to bet on the world of fame and art. That's why he started being a rapper in the 90s. His stage name was Marky Mark, and he lasted as a rapper only until 1997. Actually, as ridiculous as it sounds, the brief career as a rapper did quite well for him, creating huge hits and being among the highlights on the Billboard Hot 100.
Annie was a high school cheerleader, pom-poms and bobby socks, and no girl was.
Brothers and sisters, let's dismiss that negative vibe. Yo, it's about that time to bring forth the rhythm and the rhyme.
Mentioning one of his controversies in this new part of his life, in one situation he had praised Shabba Ranks, a musician who in that same period of time had declared that homosexuals should be crucified. As a result of that praise, he was condemned by the public eye. But that did not prevent Mark from being on the cover of Calvin Klein. His stage as a musician ended when he began to succeed in the world of cinema. Since the beginning of the 90s, he already began to act in some notorious films, but one of the roles that gave him the relevance he has today was Boogie Nights in 1997, a film that gave him a leading role and triumphed as a dramatic actor. From there, everything went up, as he then grossed more than $360 million in Planet of the Apes in 2001, and years later he was nominated for an Oscar for 2006's The Departed.
And the Oscar goes to Alan Arkin in Little Miss Sunshine.
Also being nominated for a Golden Globe for The Fighter in 2010. He managed to become one of the highest paid actors in the Hollywood industry, after starring in action movies. It is said that he has a net worth of more than $350 million, and this year, he may be nominated for an Oscar for his film Father Stu, in which he had to forget his perfect physique for a while to increase a lot of weight, in order to better interpret his role as a priest who has a complex past as a boxer. To remedy his past, Mark Wahlberg has repeatedly apologized for the events that occurred, and affirms that since the handcuffs were placed on him, he began to regret his racist comments. He also became a Catholic, so according to him, whenever he has a shoot, he makes time to go to the nearest church on set. In fact, he stipulates this in his movie contracts, so that he can make 2 weekly visits to local churches. The interpreter also participates in other social programs to help homeless women and children. For example, in 2001, he created the Mark Wahlberg Foundation to obtain and distribute funds for young people who will be able to allow them a better future in this way. He has also shown his support for same-sex marriages and gave his support to the government of Barack Obama in his time. To prove his regret, he once said, "I think being able to change my life, make my mom proud, and become a better person by focusing on my faith makes me feel honored every time I come home." Undoubtedly, despite all the problems he committed towards others, and also his serious problems with drugs, he is an actor who has been able to redeem himself over time, and is a sign that all people can sometimes change for the better, and become an example to others. What do you think of this controversial actor? Do you like his movies? Leave us your opinion below in the comments, and if you liked the video, please leave a like and subscribe to this channel to see more similar videos, and activate the notification bell so that YouTube notifies you when we upload a new video. We upload videos every week. Don't miss it, you will not regret it.